Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers. And
Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 8 o'clock from the world headquarters of GB News. This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Your weekend starts here. After their by-election triumph, are Labour celebrating victory too soon? With support for Reform UK surging, can Nigel Farage bring down the Conservative Party? And as Prince Harry says he's considering taking US citizenship, is this ultimate betrayal or the good news the country's been waiting for? This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, my Friday friends, legendary entertainment journalist Nina Mishkov and radio and Fleet Street icon, he's just jumped out of a cab, Mike Porky Perry. Also tonight, fearless former government minister Edwina Currie. She's not pulling her punches. The co-founder of Vote Leave, all the way from the United States, Douglas Carswell, and the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, King Charles and Queen Elizabeth's biographer, the brilliant Ingrid Seward. My Friday night's big opinion is on the way. My first on-air reaction to the extraordinary results of yesterday's by-elections. Is Sir Keir Starmer Britain's next Prime Minister? Find out with the news headlines first. and Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you, and good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 8 o'clock. Leading the news this evening, the UK, the US and the EU have all now blamed the Russian president for the death of the high-profile Putin critic Alexei Navalny. Protesters have now also gathered outside the Russian embassy in London. If you're watching on TV, you can see pictures there of those protesters calling for Vladimir Putin to be held accountable for the death of the high-profile opposition leader. Earlier, the leader's wife, Yulia Navalny, told the Munich Security Conference that the death of her husband will, she says, not go unpunished. And speaking in the last few hours, President Joe Biden says he was not surprised, but that he is outraged.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality. No one should be fooled, not in Russia, not at home, not anywhere in the world. Putin does not only target his citizens of other countries, as we've seen in what's going on in Ukraine right now, he also inflicts terrible crimes on his own people.
Well, in other news, we've learned today that 2 men have been arrested, one on suspicion of people smuggling and the other for entering the UK illegally. That's after a group of migrants were found this morning in the back of a freezer lorry in East Sussex. One local resident whose home overlooks the entrance to Newhaven Port said that he saw a large emergency presence, including a helicopter landing on the quayside earlier. 6 people have since been taken to hospital, but we understand no deaths have so far been reported. Political news and 2 damaging by-election defeats have piled pressure on the Prime Minister. Overnight, Jen Kitchen snatched Wellingborough with just over 45% of the vote. That's the second largest by-election swing from Conservative to Labour since the Second World War. And that result came just 2 hours after Labour's Damien Egan also won in Kingswood with just under 45% of that vote. Sir Keir Starmer says the double win is evidence that his party is a government in waiting, he says. But Rishi Sunak has insisted that Labour doesn't have a plan. And staying with political news, Labour have today published a summary of Sir Keir Starmer's taxes, showing he paid just over £99,000 in UK tax last year. That amount includes tax paid on the sale of land that was part-owned by the Labour leader and his father's estate, earning Sir Keir £275,000. And that's in contrast with Rishi Sunak, who revealed last month that he paid over £500,000 in UK tax, with a total income of £2.2 million. The BBC says that it has been alerted to anti-Semitic behaviour by some of its staff. In a note sent by the Director General Tim Davie, he said there is no place for racist abuse of any kind. That follows multiple complaints about the BBC's reporting on the Israel-Hamas war and comes after a contestant on The Apprentice made controversial remarks on social media about that conflict. One former BBC director said it shows a significant failure from management to tackle racism. Prince Harry has suggested the King's cancer diagnosis could lead to a reconciliation in the royal family. Speaking to the Good Morning America programme in the US, the Duke of Sussex said he was grateful to have spent time with his father during a fleeting visit to London last week, but he says the conversations he's had with the King about his health will remain private. And news from the sporting world in the last few hours. 6-time Olympic champion Sir Chris Hoy has revealed he is battling cancer. The former track cyclist says he's undergoing successful treatment, including chemotherapy. In a social media statement, the 47-year-old said he is remaining optimistic and that he's looking forward to the upcoming Paris Olympics. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or of course go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, Chris Hoy is a wonderful athlete. We wish him a speedy recovery. Thanks, Sam. Welcome to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. After their by-election triumph, are Labour celebrating victory too soon? With support for Reform UK surging, can Nigel Farage bring down the Conservative Party? And as Prince Harry says he's considering taking US citizenship, is this the ultimate betrayal or the good news the country has been waiting for? All that plus much more on Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. And first, my Friday Big Opinion. Good evening. Now, anyone that's been married for quite a long time will tell you it's rather dangerous asking your other half, do you still love me, dear? Best not to ask because you may not like the answer. By-elections are the political equivalent for any governing party. Any given voter asked for their opinion of the current Prime Minister and his or her administration is rarely going to come back with a glowing report. Aside from the usual honeymoon period on entering office, when of course that happens and you are popular, governments in power are never particularly liked, and therefore by-election defeats are often overanalysed and overinterpreted. Now, to be fair, the optics of the Conservatives losing 2 seats, which were safer than a Volvo estate, are clearly not good for the Prime Minister. And after a week in which Labour has had to disown an anti-Semitic prospective parliamentary candidate and perform a humiliating U-turn over their £28 billion a year Green Revolution, it will be deeply troubling to Tory insiders that Sunak wasn't able to capitalise on an especially bad week for the opposition. Of course, Sunak has had his problems too, with inflation stubbornly staying at 4%, which means more misery for Brits, with the cost of goods still too high and a further erosion in the value of their pay packets. And whilst it's been revealed that we're only in a technical recession, which could be rounded back up to no recession when detailed figures emerge, the R word is politically damaging, and rightly so, for a Prime Minister who pledged to get the economy growing. But the latest strong retail sales figures would suggest the malaise was short-lived and the economy is likely bouncing back. So whilst there is widespread frustration with the Tories, who look tired and rudderless after 14 years in power, I detect no great enthusiasm for Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour Party. I think at the next election, if there was an option at the ballot box for neither of the main parties, they're both rubbish, that would win by a landslide. Now, of course, Richard Tice, backed by GBNews star Nigel Farage, will hope that that box of none of the above is filled by Reform UK, who'll hope to win support from disaffected Tory voters and Red Wall ex-Labour supporters, disappointed that Boris Johnson didn't deliver the political revolution that they were promised. But the truth is that our first-past-the-post electoral system means that despite their strong performance at the elections yesterday, Reform UK should try to avoid premature celebration. And however much my friend Richard Tice protests, support for his new party, as we've just seen, will seal the deal on Labour's victory in the months ahead. Now, I'm not sure how Reform UK's strategy of delivering a Labour government and potentially a decade of Starmer in power, as Nigel Farage freely admitted to me on this programme, may well happen. I don't know how that makes Britain great again. With a new electoral system based upon proportional representation, Richard Tice could likely become a kingmaker and get his hands on power, albeit shared with others. But for now, the political reality is that it's a straight choice between 2 men, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, neither of whom have got the country's pulse racing. Now, there is a strong argument that Britain needs a change, and the other lot perhaps deserve a crack at power. But if they win, I doubt celebrations will extend far beyond Labour Party HQ. Voters clearly don't love the Tories anymore, but it's doubtful that running into the arms of Labour will make them any happier. OK, let's get reaction from my Friday friends. Legendary entertainment journalist Nina Mishkov and radio and Fleet Street icon Mike Parry. Mike, do Labour deserve a crack at power? Is it their turn?
I remember as a youngster, Harold Wilson had been in power in Downing Street on 2 occasions, and Ted Heath in between. And the reason he got it the first time was, and I remember my mum and dad, you know, talking about it, and our black and white television there was, oh, we've had 13 years of Tories, it's about time we gave the other lot a chance. Now, I don't think that giving the other lot a chance is a very good reason for voting for a party. It says nothing about the current incumbents in Downing Street, because they're so blinking hopeless, OK? But I honestly think that if you say, well, they're not very good, so let's give the other lot a chance, you've got to examine what the other lot, in this case Keir Starmer's Labour, are going to bring to the party. And so far, we don't know what they're bringing to the party, if they're bringing anything to the party. And I still believe very strongly there's a big silent majority in this country who don't want to tell pollsters, yes, I'm going to vote Labour, because I think that if you ever come out and reveal your credentials as anything sort of more right than centre, all of which a lot of media people now call us far rights, OK? We're not far right, we're just... From the centre, we're a bit right, and from the centre, there are a few left. They don't call the
and
people...
And Genghis Khan
hang on, Nina. They don't call the people who go a little bit left far left, but they call us far right, and I'm a small C Conservative. I think there's millions of small C Conservatives who don't want to step forward and actually identify themselves, who will form a very, very big voting bloc in the next election.
Well, it's interesting you should raise that issue, Mike Parry, because we're going to be talking to Edwina Curry in a couple of minutes. Yeah. I'll be asking her, are Labour celebrating too soon? Yeah. And I think you're right. Those shy Tory voters will come out at the next election, and it could be a nasty surprise for Keir Starmer. But here's my question to you, Nina Mishkov. Does our democracy require a change in government every so often? Would it be good for the country to have Labour just as the natural cycle of things?
Well, I think there is something in that, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, look at Mike Parry.
Well, absolutely.
That's a bit harsh.
And they've been in power for 14 years now. And I was watching Question Time last night on BBC, and they say that it's a pretty proportionate audience, a good reflection of the voting public.
It rarely is, to be honest. It rarely is.
No, it is. They work pretty hard on it. And the thing that got the biggest applause of the night was somebody saying, for God's sake, we need an election now. And there was absolute wild applause. Because people are just sick of it. They are absolutely sick of it. You talk about Nigel Farage bringing down the Tories. They're doing such a brilliant job. He doesn't need to do anything. He just fold his arms and sit back and laugh. If you look at the results of the by-election, Labour overturned huge majorities. 18,000 they overturned.
Yeah, but hardly anybody turned out to vote.
That's all now. I was listening to John Curtis on the radio today. He is the agreed pollster pundit. Yeah. And he said, oh, that's what every losing side always says in a by-election. Oh, it was a low turnout. But who are the people that didn't turn out? They were the Tory voters, because they couldn't bear to vote Tory. Now,
but they can't bear to vote Labour either.
They may not at this point be able to stomach, in their eyes, voting Labour. But when the election comes, who knows? And let me just say, Labour are absolutely not celebrating. They are really, really taking it very carefully and not taking it for granted, because a week's a long time in politics. We're not nearly at November yet.
But do you identify any great enthusiasm out there among the British public for a Labour government? Because I don't.
For a Labour government. Look, the trouble is...
It's not like Tony Blair 2.0, is it? This is not New Labour, 1997.
But you mentioned Tony Blair, and it's like, but we're not a presidency. Yeah. And Tony Blair had enormous charisma, and Keir Starmer basically does not. That's the trouble. But we're not talking that Keir Starmer is the Labour Party. He is the man who's leading the Labour Party.
But I didn't identify any great enthusiasm for the Labour Party
No, people want a government that doesn't put profits before people, which is what the Conservative government has done.
Nina, they want a leader. They want a leader who's going to deal with the practical problems of the cost of living and the NHS. I think very much more than these two by-elections last night, Rochdale is going to be very significant. Now, we all know what's happened at Rochdale. The official candidate, Azhar Ali, is not now representing the Labour Party, because at one meeting of the Rochdale Labour Party, there was an enormous amount of anti-Semitic bile spilt out. Now, if that's in Rochdale, and that was hidden away, by the way, for a long time, it only came out because somebody had recorded the comments, how many other Labour constituencies think like that? And how much more of that are we going to find out?
How many other Conservative constituencies think that? It's not just a Labour problem. And it's not a Labour... Keir Starmer has done a fantastic... I don't vote Labour, by the way.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer has done a fantastic job of pushing Jeremy Corbyn and the left to one side. He's kept
Nina,
and he's actually rooted out so much anti-Semitism.
I don't agree.
He's done fantastic. Well,
Mr. Azhar Ali, the official candidate, was a big Keir Starmer favourite, and even he has come out with revolting comments against Jewish people in Israel.
Psychic, unless that guy said it to Keir Starmer himself.
I agree, but it means it's still happening in the body politic of Labour.
And
they are still like that.
What about the Islamophobia in the Conservative Party? And that doesn't exist, I suppose?
Well, I don't know. Give me an example of it.
It doesn't appear to be on the same scale, Nina.
Well,
I mean, this is a prospective parliamentary candidate that the Labour Party have just disowned. It's not a good look, is it?
Well, they have been, if you like, duped by him. I mean, it does happen.
And how many other dupers are in there? I wonder how many Jeremy Corbyn sleepers, Nina, how many Jeremy Corbyn sleepers are sitting on the backbenches of the Labour Party?
Hysterical nonsense.
It's not hysterical nonsense.
Even sleepers, are they? We're talking about Rebecca Long-Bailey, John McDonnell, Richard Burgon.
Exactly.
They are going to make merry hell.
They are all silenced. They are silenced.
And do you know why they're silenced? Because he doesn't want them to speak out ahead of the election. I mean, you know, the deputy leader of the Labour Party is going to wreck the economy of this country.
She is not, Rachel. She is not in control of the economy.
She will be when they get into power, because she's got the power of the unions behind her.
Rachel Reeves is the Chancellor, and I cannot wait for her to become the proper Chancellor.
But you won't be voting Labour, though?
I don't have to vote Labour. I vote for another party entirely. But if I were in a sitting...
Monster raving?
Well, we wish. If I was in a constituency where there was a danger that the Tory would not be defeated, I would vote Labour.
OK. Well, listen, folks, are you excited about the idea of a Labour victory? Let me quickly run you, by the way, through the candidates in Rochdale next week. And we have Azhar Ali, Independent, formerly Labour. We have Paul Ellison for the Conservatives, Ian Donaldson for the Liberal Democrats, Simon Danchuk for Reform UK, George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain, Reverend Mark Coleman, Independents, Michael Howarth, Independent, David Anthony Tully, Independent, William Howarth, Independent, Guy Otten, Green Party, and Ravin Rodent Subordna, official monster-raving loony party. I shouldn't dare to offer you my view of who to vote for, but those are your candidates for Rochdale next week. But coming up next, after their by-election triumph, are Labour celebrating victory too soon? Do the Tories have a potential sting in the tail? I'll be asking forthright former Government Minister Edwina Currie. Edwina is next.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. I'm Mark Dolan, and your weekend starts here. Now, coming up, with support for Reform UK surging, can Nigel Farage bring down the Conservative Party? But first, yesterday was undoubtedly a good day for Labour, with Sir Keir Starmer's opposition party celebrating 2 by-election victories in safe Tory seats. In Wellingborough, Northamptonshire, the party took Peter Bone's former seat, which he had held with a majority of more than 18,000. And in Kingswood, South Gloucestershire, Labour overturned an 11,000 Conservative majority. But are Labour celebrating victory too soon? Let's get the views of former government minister and radio and television broadcaster Edwina Currie. Hi, Edwina. Now, we know by-elections are often about giving the incumbent a bloody nose, but BBC elections expert Sir John Curtis says that the swing from the Tories to Labour in Wellingborough was the second largest in any post-war election. That sounds like more than just a protest vote.
Yeah, well, if I'd been in Wellingborough, I'd have probably stayed at home just like most of the electorate did. I mean, Peter Bone was an idiot. His girlfriend was an idiot, and wanting to stand was a really stupid thing to do. The selection committee that chose her are all idiots. And Conservative headquarters were absolutely crazy to let that happen. They should have seen that disaster happen in their headlights and should have done something about it and made sure that at least we had a candidate that we could kind of warm to. I mean, there was no campaigning there of any kind. It's absolutely crackers to let that happen. You can't let a seat like that go by default. So I think we've been well and truly punished in Wellingborough, and I think it was deserved. When it comes to Kingswood, I remember that happening back in, let me think, 1987, because we won Kingswood in 83 when Margaret Thatcher had her second victory, and we lost it in 87 when she had her third victory. So it's always been a bit of a chop and change seat. And I think, as other people have said, turnout was awful. I mean, turnout below 40% is dire. When I fought a county council election seat here 2 years ago, just a local council seat, the turnout was 55%. I think we were quite proud of that, actually, that, it generated that much interest. But there were 2 by-elections where the main result, the top vote was none of yous. None of yous. You're all the same. And that's a real problem. I think it's particularly a problem, obviously, for the government. But my advice to Rishi and the gang in Downing Street is actually just stick to your guns. Keep doing what you know to be the right thing. Because, if you change now and we find ourselves having to do a U-turn. First of all, that's copying what Keir Starmer keeps doing. But also, if we do U-turns and we still lose, then you've got a lose-lose situation. At least if you do the right thing, there's a reasonable hope that the economy might improve quite rapidly. And then we've got a good case to put to the electorate in, probably about 8 months. Ooh.
Well, Edwina, I tend to agree with you, notwithstanding the scale of the losses yesterday, which ought to concern the Conservatives. You do have the fact that by-elections do tend to get lost by the incumbent governing party. It is an opportunity for voters to demonstrate their displeasure with what the government are up to. But when it comes to either a poll in the spring or in the autumn, it will be a choice of Sunak versus Starmer, and that will focus minds, won't it?
Well, I think it's appalling that we seem to be trying to fight an American-style election here. I mean, I can see why, but we don't have a presidential system. We choose a government based on voting for somebody at our local level. Where I am in the High Peak, we've got a wonderful Conservative MP, young man who works extremely hard, and I'd very much like to see him there, whatever is going on in Westminster. And to constantly, this is a mistake here, I think, Mark. You're a highly intelligent man. You will understand the subtleties of what I'm about to say. That we have had 5 prime ministers in the year since 2016. That has not actually been a very good idea. It's not done the country any good. It's certainly not done the political parties any good. And of course, even within those administrations, you get rapid changes in ministers, which means that you have hardly anybody in the posts of importance pulling the levers of power in departments like education or health or wherever it is, who've been in the job for more than 5 minutes. And let me tell you, it takes a while to get to know how things work and how you can actually make things happen. So changing again, which I gather some Conservatives want to do, it would be a Wellingborough operation. Absolutely stupid, idiotic thing to do. We should make sure that we are doing the right thing in government, the right thing for the country, putting the country's needs very much to the forefront. And I think then we've got a really good case to put to the electorate in due course. I'm quite sure that that 20-point gap will narrow when it actually comes to polling day.
OK, let me bring, if I can, Edwina, my brilliant Friday friends in on this conversation, Nina Mishkov and Mike Parry. Nina, do you think our system is now more presidential? Do you think that when it comes to the election, people will be voting Starmer versus Sunak rather than Labour versus Tory?
No, I don't think that. I mean, we mentioned this earlier. I said it's not a presidential, competition. It is election. It is about the party. Although the figureheads have to have charisma. We discussed it with Tony Blair had charisma. Keir Starmer has not. But I think the problem is, Edwina, don't you agree that apart from the young man that you talk about, that the actual standard of politicians that we have at the top in the Tory party now are so grossly inferior to the people that were around in your day, it's quite impossible to think how they could possibly continue.
Oh, we used to get that said about us, of course, as when we first arrived. Oh, my goodness me, actually got women in the House of Commons now. I feel like, everything is falling to bits. We turned out to be good at the job, partly because we had Margaret Thatcher, but partly also because she and many of us had very clear ideas, and we had the time, we had the opportunity to put those ideas into operation. Now, what's happened, I think, more recently is that with COVID and then with the Ukraine war and now with what's happening in Israel and in Gaza, we're suffering all sorts of huge international shocks. And that's created inflation. It's created a kind of a break between what we're all familiar with and what we are now facing. This kind of PTSD going on, it seems to me. Everybody wants some easy answers. There aren't any easy answers.
Mike Parry, the clock's against us, but I detect, reading between the lines of what you said this evening, that you detect a potential political upset in a few months' time.
Well, no. Look, Edwina Currie is a great Conservative for me because she's small C Conservative. we're labelled far right, but we're just sort of a bit of centre-right. We want conservative policies. Now, Edwina, if I'd have been in those constituencies last night, I'd have been wandering the earth trying to find somebody who expounded Tory policies to vote for, and having not found anybody, I might have voted for reform. But hopefully, just to shock the Tory party into getting their act together for the election when it comes. And I hope reform is just a slight bubble of resentment and disaffection from Tory voters who I believe are there as a silent majority who will come back.
Edwina, briefly, if you can, closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. I think there's something in what Mike says. I think reform is probably like the drain cleaner, the nasty caustic stuff that you put down the drain to unblock it. But actually, it doesn't run the water system and it doesn't run the sewage system. All those basic systems, all those things that we need and want, the way the economy is run, the way that welfare is run, the way that enterprise is encouraged and so on. All those things actually depend on having a Tory government in future.
Edwina, always great to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to former Government Minister Edwina Currie. Let me tell you that the brilliant Edwina will return soon, as will, in the next part, Mike Parry and Nina Mishkov. Now, coming up, with support for Reform UK surging, can Nigel Farage bring down the Conservative Party? I'll be debating out with the co-founder of Vote Leave. Yes, next up, we have fearless political disruptor Douglas Carswell. He's next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Coming Coming up, as Prince Harry says he's considering taking US citizenship, is this the ultimate betrayal or the good news the country has been waiting for? But first, the Telegraph newspaper are reporting that Reform UK, the party led by Richard Tice and whose honorary president is GB News star Nigel Farage, now pose a mortal threat to the Conservatives, having doubled their share of support since last summer and having clocked up 13% of the votes in the Wellingborough by-election yesterday and 10% in Kingswood. In both seats, the party came third but achieved double-digit support. These were the best by-election performances in the party's short history. Now, notwithstanding the threats that they pose to the Tories at the next election, could they ultimately wipe out the Conservatives and replace them as the main party of the right in this country? Let's speak to the co-founder of Vote Leave, former Conservative MP and the man who became Britain's first UKIP Member of Parliament, live from the United States, Douglas Carswell. Now, Douglas, I know you're tight for time, so let's crack on. Could Reform UK ultimately change the political map of this country?
They absolutely could, and I hope they do. What a shambles the Conservative Party is. The Conservative Party only ever seems to do the right thing under duress. They took a decade or more to finally accept that Britain needed to leave the EU. They have consistently got the big decisions wrong. They only ever do it when they're forced to do the right thing. And I think that Reform is the latest manifestation of this, putting pressure on them to do the right thing. They frankly deserve to be annihilated at the next election, given the state of the country and the state of the economy.
Would you like to see them annihilated as a former Conservative Member of Parliament, Douglas?
I think I would, simply because I think it would be in the national interest to have a proper Conservative force in politics. And the shower that currently runs the Conservative Parliamentary Party in Westminster, it prevents Conservative voters getting what they vote for. So until perhaps the Conservative Party is annihilated, its current leadership is replaced by people who actually have principle, I don't see how Conservative voters will ever get the thing they vote for. Look, the modern Conservative Party is like Labour. It's a creation of a small group of people who, through an A-list and through the manipulation of the political process, have basically foisted on the country a bunch of third-rate mediocrities. Just look at the composition of the current cabinet. You almost have to be someone devoid of original thought to serve in it. Surely the party of Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher can do better, and if it can't, it needs to be replaced by people who can.
Nigel Farage, though, has a dilemma, doesn't he, Douglas? Destroy the Tory party or join it after the next election and transform it. Which course do you think he might take?
Well, I suspect it's really the Tories who will answer that question. Does the Conservative Party have any room in its ranks for someone like Nigel Farage? They are the party of A-listers, a party who has selected people on the basis of their immutable characteristics rather than their merit or their ability or their beliefs. Perhaps you should be asking the Conservatives, post-election defeat, would they have room for Conservatives who don't toady the party line, who don't tick the woke boxes? Perhaps if the Conservative Party wants to exist, it needs to be a party that allows people like Nigel Farage. I wonder if the Conservative Party today would ever have allowed some of the great Conservative leaders of the past to stand in its so-called A-list seats. Mind you, I suspect the Tory party today has no such thing as an A-list seat.
Of course, you performed your own individual, single-person political revolution by becoming the first UKIP Member of Parliament, and you are the co-founder of Vote Leave. Last question to you. Do you accept the argument that a vote for Reform UK is a vote for Sir Keir Starmer?
I think it's perhaps only after we've had Keir Starmer and real socialism rather than the slow socialism of Rishi Sunak that the centre-right will come to its senses. So you could almost sound Leninist, the worse the better. Perhaps we need to experience the full horrors of real socialism in order to rediscover the virtues of the free market.
Douglas, thank you for making the time. We know you're a busy chap and we'll catch up soon. My thanks there to the co-founder of Vote Leave Live from Mississippi in the United States, Douglas Carswell. Listen, let's get a quick reaction from Nina Mishkov and Mike Parry, my Friday friends. Nina, what do you think about Nigel Farage's dilemma? The Conservative Party is 190 years old. It is the most successful political party in the history of Europe. He'll be tempted to join that, won't he?
Well, what will be left for him to join? They've destroyed themselves. They're imploding. Is it the 5 different, sections? All fighting each other, all loathing each other, all trying to undermine. So where is the cohesive party? There is no party. It is a rag bag of people who are on the make for themselves.
Indeed, but if you were one N Farage, what would you be thinking at this point? Because what you have the chance with the Conservatives after the next election is to reinvent the thing with an existing brand. Reform UK still unproven and not really established.
Reform UK will get nowhere. Now, I'm a child of the 80s when the SDP started. Nina, you'll remember the SDP, OK? And it started with a huge burst of enthusiasm and lots of people rushed to join it, and then it just filtered out.
But to be fair, SDP, you have to explain, it was on the left, it's not on the right.
No, it was centrist. It went centrist. It was a reaction.
Sort of moderate version of the Labour Party.
A moderate version of the Labour Party.
Social Democratic Party.
Yes,
so
but they...
left of centre.
No, but they thought the Labour Party had gone too left, so they tried to be centrist left and against Tory right. What I'm saying is that the best option is for the Tories just to, reboot themselves after the next election, whether they win it or lose it, and go on from there, because they've got such a fantastic infrastructure. As you already said, I think they're oldest political party in the world, never mind Europe, OK? So with that fantastic infrastructure, look, Labour have been on the brink of extinction during my lifetime because of far-left infiltration to the party.
Jeremy Corbyn was a complete disaster.
Yeah, but even Ed Miliband was a complete disaster. You see what I mean? And you've seen them time and time again be written off completely. But again, they are a hugely established political party in this country. And if anybody's going to come in and rebuild on centre-right, they've got to do it on the framework of the Tory party, not try and invent their own new party, because it won't work.
So if you were advising Nigel Farage, you'd say join the Tory party and fix it?
I would say to Nigel Farage, I think you've got some fantastic ability and talent politically. Take them to an already established political structure and work from within.
Briefly, Nina.
No, the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson weeded out all the wise heads because they were not, Boris men.
Yeah.
So the whole kind of foundation of the Tory party is gone. All those wise people...
No, I don't agree. While you've still got Conservative Party headquarters, which has been... Yes, exactly, which has been around for 200 years, this is the club and we're all in it, you can rebuild it from within. You can't start again. No, you can rebuild it from within. I'm certain you can.
There you go. Well, look, my Friday friends don't agree, which is the whole point of the show. But coming up next, as Prince Harry says he's considering taking US citizenship, is this the ultimate betrayal or the good news the country's been waiting for? And how will King Charles feel about it? I'll be asking the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and King Charles's biographer, Ingrid Seward. That's next.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie?
We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, in a shock new interview with the popular US talk show Good Morning America, Prince Harry has spoken for the first time about his father King Charles's cancer diagnosis. He told ABC News that he was grateful for the time with his father during their brief meeting in London. He also expressed the hope that this sad news could bring the family together, adding that he'll stop in and see his family as much as he can. But in a shock development, Prince Harry has surprised royal watchers by admitting in the same interview that he has considered becoming a US citizen. So is this the final insult to his country of birth, or would it be in Harry's best interest to become an American? Let's get the views of the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and the author of a brilliant new royal book, My Mother and I, The Inside Story of King Charles and our late Queen. Ingrid Stewart, lovely to have you on the show. Your reaction to this news that Harry has considered US citizenship?
Well, I don't know that Harry really understands the implications of taking US citizenship. It was a clever question, and he sidestepped it quite well and said, well, I'm here for these guys. You know, he was talking about the veterans that he is, you know, helping for the future Invictus Games in Whistler. So I don't think he was really prepared for this question, but maybe he was. But he said, I have considered it, but it's not my priority right now. But whether or not Harry has considered it, possibly he has for tax purposes, possibly he has. But what it did bring up, which was something that I actually didn't know, was that he would have to renounce his British titles, his royal titles. He wouldn't have to renounce his heritage, but he would have to renounce his royal titles if he were to become an American citizen.
Well, indeed, I'll be dealing with this in my big opinion tomorrow night, and I think there are a few million reasons why he won't make this move, and it's to do with keeping those royal titles, which give him prestige and help him to achieve those megabucks deals. Now, Ingrid, Harry has spoken in more emollient terms about his family in this interview, suggesting that the King's worrying cancer diagnosis could bring the family together. Do you think we'll see a different approach from Harry going forward?
Well, I don't think it's Harry we need to worry about. I think it's the way the rest of the family want to deal with it. Harry has made some overtures, but not to the rest of his family. He's made overtures to his father, who, of course, he's not going to say, you know, Harry, I'm not going to talk to you. But he might say, Harry, I think you have to make peace with the rest of your family before we can go much further with this. But in a 45-minute conversation, which is apparently what they had, there's not a great deal you can say. I mean, he's obviously going to say, Pa, I was so upset. I'm so worried about you. And Charles is going to say, it's all fine. It's all going to be fine. But I don't think they would get into a very deep conversation during that period. Certainly, Charles would not wanted to have done so because he doesn't like confronting that kind of thing. I don't think anybody does when there's a family rift and they've been diagnosed with a potentially life-threatening illness. The last thing they want to do is to delve into, where the family member might have gone wrong or might have been right. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's not that moment for that kind of conversation.
Indeed. Ingrid, let me bring my Friday friends in on the conversation, Mike Parry and Nina Mishkov. Your fantastic book is about King Charles and his relationship with his beloved mother, Elizabeth II. How do you think Elizabeth, the late great Queen, would take the news, the speculation that Harry considered revoking his UK citizenship?
Well, I think she'd take it in the way she took most things. She'd just say, well, if that's what he wants to do, that's what he must do. I think she's so much from another generation that I think she would just simply have a bit of a problem getting her head around what Harry did and didn't want to do. So her attitude, which I think would probably be the attitude of any money, look, whatever makes him happy and keeps him from making any more trouble, he should do. And I think that
you've worked in the United States as a print journalist.
Yeah.
Do you think Harry should become a naturalised American citizen and be done with it?
Well, I think that's a bit of a side issue, to be honest. I'd like to put to Ingrid this, that your own words, Mark, where he was emollient in his comments today, having come back from Britain. Ingrid, could it be that when he was last here, he suddenly discovered for the first time, actually, he's not very wanted in this country. His brother wouldn't meet him. His father, according to some reports, gave him only 12 minutes and then flew off to Sandringham. And young Harry might be very shocked to find out that, actually, you're not wanted very much in this country anymore. Get back to the United States.
Ingrid?
Well, my opinion, and it's my opinion, is that Harry probably was very well aware that he's not popular. He would be a complete idiot, and he's not that stupid. I know people say he's stupid, but I think he knows that he has lost the love of the British people, which really was there a few years ago. We all loved Harry. But
Nina. Yeah, Nina, you're shaking your head.
Well, I mean, the media's done a fantastic job of destroying Harry's reputation in this country, and it continues to do so. And I watched that little interview that Harry gave to ABC, and he didn't suggest, there's a spin on it. Like, there's a spin on everything. Everybody's just watching for him to make some kind of mistake, or so they can blow it up and sell more papers or get more clicks or whatever. And the thing is, it was suggested to him by the host, who's Sam Reeve, who happens to be Christopher Reeve's son, late Superman. And so he said, I found myself that many families come together with a kind of life-threatening situation, and what do you think? And Harry just agreed with him.
Okay.
And so he wasn't Harry suggesting it. And Harry and Meghan are a huge loss to this country. Look up, Camilla's having to be fielded out all around the place.
Interesting debate. Interesting. Well, look, Ingrid, can I congratulate you on the new book? It's winning rave reviews. It's got the country talking. It's called The Inside Story of King Charles. Sorry, let me get the name right. It's My Mother and I, the inside story of King Charles and our late Queen. Ingrid, thank you so much. We'll join you soon again, I'm sure. Patrick Christie's looking forward to tonight's show. What's happening?
Well, who would you have voted for if you had to vote in these by-elections? I know who I would have voted for, and he joins me, Nick the Flying Brick from the Monster Raving Loony Party at 9 o'clock. Some more serious stuff on there, a concerning update on the King's health, and an ex-KGB agent live in the studio to lift the lid on this Navalny death.
Nice one. Well, listen, do join me for Mark Dolan tonight, tomorrow and Sunday. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Thanks to my pundits.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers. sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Berkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. The weekend's likely to start mostly dry, however that's not going to last long as there is a weather system waiting out to the west of the UK, and it's this that's going to bring some heavy persistent rain later on Saturday. But for the time being we are still under the ridge of high pressure that brought a quieter day for many today. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud pushing in from the west as we go through the night, and this cloud will bring some outbreaks of drizzly rain. All the time towards the east and the northeast, some clearer skies. It may turn a little fresher than some recent nights, perhaps dropping to low single figures across parts of Scotland, but many a mild start to the day tomorrow. The best chance of any sunshine tomorrow will be across the east and the northeast early